Bonjour, bienvenue to your premiere lecture for French 2. In this first lecture, we're going to be talking about the question, Comment est ta famille? Comment est ta famille? What is your family like? So let's jump right in. Je vous présente ma famille. So here is my family. Je vous présente ma famille. This first family we're going to talk about is the famous family, The Simpsons. First, let's take a look at what Maggie has to say. Bonjour, je m'appelle Maggie. Aujourd'hui, je vous présente ma famille. Sur cette photo, il y a mon père, ma mère, mon frère et ma sœur. Moi, je suis la cadette. Mon père est gros et chauve. Aussi, il n'est ni intelligent ni sérieux, mais il est assez créatif. Ma mère est une artiste créative et sérieuse. Elle est aussi mince. Mes parents sont âgés. Mon frère est très actif et il n'est pas très gentil. Ma sœur est gentille et très intelligente. Elle est jeune aussi. J'adore ma famille amusante. So now we're going to look at each part of that composition and kind of break down some of the pieces and make sure we understand how they are used. So first we're looking at possessives. There are three ways that we say my in French. Mon, ma, and mes. You'll see them in this composition. We have mon père, we have ma mère, and we have mes parents. So when we're talking about a male object or a masculine object, we use mon. If we're talking about a feminine object or a feminine person, we use ma. And if there's more than one that's mine, it is me. If the word starts with a vowel sound and singular, we always use mon. Now for adjectives. So adjectives are any word that we use to describe a noun. And here we have a lot of them. Gros for fat, chauve for bald, intelligent, obvious, intelligent, sérieux for serious, again a cognate, créatif for creative. You notice all three of those are cognates, which means they look very similar between the French and the English. Créative again and sérieuse again, but this is spelled differently. Mince for skinny, âgé for old, actif for athletic or sporty, gentil for kind, gentille also for kind, but again spelled differently, intelligent with a slight difference from the first time, jeune for young, amusante for fun or funny. So these are all different examples of adjectives. There's tons of adjectives we can use in French. The only problem is that in French, we use adjectives differently than how we use them in English. Now we're going to take a look at the different adjectives that are in that writing. If you remember for French 1, when we talked about how to use adjectives or how to describe people, we always had to remember one big rule, that the adjective has to match who we're talking about. So if we're talking about a masculine object or a male, our descriptive words, our adjectives need to be spelled one way, but if we're talking about a girl or a feminine object, they need to be spelled differently. Typically, if it's going from masculine, like with petit, to feminine, petite, we just add an E. Almost all feminine adjectives are going to be like that. Just add an E. However, there are going to be several categories of adjectives where we're going to have to make slight differences before we add that E. So for instance, adjectives like créatif, which end in IF. Before we add that E, we're going to make it a V. So créative. IF becomes IVE. Next, adjectives that end in EUX like sérieux, and there are several of these adjectives. One of the biggest categories of adjectives are adjectives that end in EUX. When we make sérieux feminine, we need to change it to EUSE, sérieuse. Next, gentil. That is adjective end in IL. Now this same rule is going to apply if it were EN or ON. Before we add that E, we double that consonant. So if it were Canadien, which ends in en, we would have two n's before we add an e. If it's the adjective bon, which is good, it's going to be bonnne to make it feminine. And lastly, if the adjective already has an e, leave it alone and just leave it as is. So jeune for masculine is jeune for feminine. Also, if the adjective is describing something that is plural, most of the time, all you need to do is add an S. Can you find the one time it's probably not going to be that way? If you found the word sérieux that already has an X, then you are correct. Sérieux, since it ends with an X, is already treated like a plural adjective. So sérieux, il est sérieux, he is serious, ils sont sérieux, they are serious, would be spelled the same way. Next, we're going to talk about the proud family. Je vous présente ma famille. Bonjour, je m'appelle Oscar Proud et c'est ma famille. J'habite avec ma mère, ma femme et mes 3 enfants. Ma mère, c'est une vieille femme grosse. Elle a les cheveux blancs. Ma femme s'appelle Trudy. C'est une belle femme avec les yeux marrons. Ma petite fille est sportive, mais elle est aussi pénible. Elle a les yeux noirs. J'ai 2 jeunes jumeaux marrons, Bébé et Sissi. Bébé a des cheveux noirs et Sissi a des cheveux bruns. Et moi, je suis très grand et mince. J'ai les cheveux courts et noirs. Voilà, c'est ma famille. So now let's take a look at these adjectives first. You notice that we've done the exact same thing. Some adjectives we've just added an E. Some adjectives we added an S. Some adjectives we didn't do anything to at all. We had to make sure that the adjectives were describing the object they're describing. So for instance, let's take a special look at Elle a les cheveux blancs. Well, we're talking about a girl, right? Elle. However, blanc is not describing her, but describing hair, which is masculine plural. So when I change it to white hair, les cheveux blancs, I just add an S, not an E. Please make sure you're paying attention to what is the adjective actually describing. Is it an object in a sentence or the subject of the sentence or something else? Again, you'll also notice with the word marron. Again, it's describing les yeux, not femme. However, marron never changes, so it is in the masculine form even though it doesn't have an S. Okay. Now we're going to look at these 4 specific words. Vieille, belle, petite, jeune, and jumeau. You'll notice that most adjectives go after the word they're describing, like we said with les cheveux blancs, les yeux marrons, les yeux noirs, des cheveux noirs, etc. So most adjectives go after the noun they're describing. But these ones we're looking at specifically because these adjectives, vieille, petite, belle, jeune, are in front of the noun that they describe. And that is because we have some adjectives that go in front of the noun rather than behind. These are the Bangs adjectives. Bangs because it describes 5 different categories: beauty, age, number, good, bad, and size. Now, a little footnote, not every adjective that might describe beauty or age or size goes in front of a noun. So there are going to be a few exceptions. We'll point them out if we ever see them. But for the most part, these are the adjectives you're going to use most often. So for beauty, je suis un beau garçon, or tu es une belle fille. I am a handsome boy, you are a beautiful girl. Since it's describing beauty, it goes in front of the noun garçon and fille. Also, we have to remember still that even though it's a Bangs adjective, we have to pay attention to gender. Beau is the masculine form, belle is the feminine form. Beau is an interesting adjective because the spelling makes a big change when we use it. So pay attention for that. Age. So there's a lot of ways we can talk about age, but the 2 that are going to be Bangs adjectives are jeune and vieille. We can also add the word for new, nouveau, into this category as well. Numbers. We've talked about numbers a lot. We've used numbers a lot, so this one shouldn't be that weird to us. J'ai trois amis. I have 3 friends. Tu as 5 sœurs. You have 5 sisters. The only thing about numbers is that you don't have to worry about agreement with them. Unless you're trying to say one, then it would be un or une, just like our determinant. Good and bad for G. When we're talking about good and bad, these are the only 2 adjectives that go in this category. Mauvais for bad, bon or bonne in this case for good. Last is size. So there's a lot of ways we can describe size of an object or a person. When we're talking about size with Bang's adjectives, we're really just talking about the word big and small, grand and petite. So make sure you understand Bang's adjectives and make sure you apply them when you're talking about your family, talking about yourself, or talking about anything. So we have to, 1, remember that everything has to agree. Boy adjectives with boy words, feminine adjectives with feminine words, plural adjectives with plural words. Pay attention to how we make those changes. And then we also have to pay attention to where does the adjective go? Does it go before the noun or after? Come back to this lecture anytime you need. If you need quick review, until next time, a bientôt.